Hey, how are you? Welcome to this lecture on point of view in short stories. When we read fiction, our sense of who is telling us the story is, I think, as important as what happens. Unlike drama or movies in which events are acted out in front of the audience, fiction is always mediated or represented to us by someone else, a narrator. And I think as readers, we're often very aware of the voice of a narrator telling the story as if the words are being spoken aloud. And typically, stories also reveal a distinct angle of vision or perspective from which the characters, events, and other aspects are viewed. And so, in this short video, I'm going to go over some common points of view and add to our vocabulary of terms. Now, types of narration that I think we're already familiar with is the first person narrator. For example, we've been reading William Carlos Williams' The Use of Force, and he utilizes a first person narrator. With this narrator's point of view, we have to keep in mind how reliable the narrator is. How objective does the narrator seem in depicting other people and events? In what ways, if any, do the narrator's perceptions seem influenced by his or her personal experiences, circumstances, values, or feelings? These are some things that we need to keep in mind and make decisions about regarding the narrator's point of view. I think we'll read stories in our class where the first person voice isn't very objective, and we have to kind of read between the lines as to how much of it to accept or perhaps reject. Moving on with types of narration, along with first person narrator, we also have the omniscient narrator. Many stories are told in this point of view where the narrator seems to have access to all kinds of details, but it's told from an external viewpoint. You're never really inside one person's mind, for example. However, there are times where you can see something from a specific character's viewpoint, and even as it's embedded within an omniscient narrator's point of view. And that's something called free indirect style, when a narrator, otherwise omniscient, conveys a particular character's viewpoint by resorting to the character's own language. And that's something that we want to be on the lookout for as we read. The third person narrator, similar to the omniscient narrator, is external to the characters within the story, and is typically told from kind of a bird's eye view. And then the second person narrator is not as common as the omniscient third person narration tends to be, but it's a second person narration where it's a story told directly to the reader. So by default, it kind of turns the reader into one of the characters, because the you that the narrator keeps addressing, even though it might be a character within the story, it also feels very intimate as the narrator keeps using the second person pronoun you. And for this week's readings, along with orientation and the cask of Amontillado, we're going to be reading a story by William Faulkner called A Rose for Emily. It's a really interesting story. William Faulkner, he's known for The Sound and the Fury, and he's one of these authors who belongs to the category of American Southern writers, and particularly Southern Gothic that sort of draws this root word from grotto, caves, and the Gothic is sort of has a tendency to have dark overtones and kind of these haunted houses and ghostly figures. And I think, you know, it's and you know, as you read A Rose for Emily, I think you'll kind of notice some macabre themes that make it into a gothic story. But it's also a story that's really interesting in terms of point of view. In particular, who is narrating the story. And I wanted to highlight for you just a moment from the middle of A Rose for Emily. This is not the beginning, it's sort of midway through. Here's the narrator stating the following. We had long thought of them as a tableau. Miss Emily, a slender figure in white, in the background her father, a spraddled silhouette in the foreground, his back to her, and clutching a horsewhip, the two of them framed by the back-flung front door. So when she got to be 30 and was still single, we were not pleased exactly, but vindicated. Even with insanity in the family, she wouldn't have turned down all of her chances if they had really materialized. Notice the tone here. When the narrator says we were not pleased exactly, vindicated. They're pleased by the fact that Miss Emily is turning out to be an old maid, and unlike the omniscient narrator, the third person narrator, there seems to be kind of almost a personality to the narrator's voice in A Rose for Emily. And so one of the questions I'm asking you to consider for this upcoming week is to consider the question of, yeah, who is the narrator, and how would we kind of even name should we call them a first person narrator? What do we do with sort of the communal voice here of the we? So anyways, hopefully you'll enjoy reading the story and kind of puzzling through the question of narration for A Rose for Emily. And you'll find details in the homework Dropbox as well, but uh, for this week, we'll focus on point of view. Thank you, and I'll talk to you guys later.